anyone else remember years ago when ReZero came out, the first season, and you had the moment where Subaru confronted Amelia and had a huge argument with her, and it exposed Subaru for his very disgusting nature and what type of individual he was at that point. It kind of just laid everything out and allowed us to see what our main character actually was and how he felt he deserved everything. But in reality, he did not. That same feeling, that same vibe I got from ReZero many years ago, I got from this week's episode of Mushoku Tensei. And the reason for it is because this is probably the most important episode of the entirety of Mushoku Tensei thus far, and probably a major point of the entire series that's going to continuously be fought back to throughout the journey of Rudy's character. And the reason why I say that is because the argument really showcases what Rudy has been doing since he got teleported to the Demon Continent, but also what has happened with his father, Paul, and it just, the whole world really opens up with this episode and showcases it isn't just a happy adventure. And so, let's dive into the nitty-gritty. There is a lot to just unpackage from the argument between Rudy and Paul, because the whole concept is going to lead to a lot of moral debates and debates between the fans on who was actually right and who was actually wrong, which leads into why I talked about ReZero, because when Subaru exposed himself for what he was, people are debating if Amelia was wrong or Subaru was wrong, and I heavily stated Subaru was 100% in the wrong, Amelia was completely innocent. But in this case, with Rudy and Paul, they're both in the wrong and they're both right. And I want to kind of get into both sides of the discussion and kind of why some would side with one or the other. Like, why would some would side with Paul, why some would side with Rudy. So, when we look at the meeting between Paul and Rudy, you clearly can see something is up. Like, even before we go into the reveal of what Paul said to Rudy and all that, and the argument, the breaking down of negotiations and stuff, it was clear as day Paul has been through a lot. His entire face just speaks for itself. Like, the last time we saw Paul, he did not look nowhere near as bad off like he is now. Like, he looks really weathered, and, he just doesn't keep a clean shave anymore. You can see he has a lot of, lack of sleep, like bags under his eyes. Just everything about Paul shows that he is under immense stress, depression, and just hasn't been taking care of himself. So, instantly when you see his character appear within the episode, it's a direct indication that something has obviously happened. There is something bad that has happened. Even if we as the audience do not know, it's very clear, which should have definitely tipped off Rudy in that moment that something was definitely wrong with his father, which leads into the conversation with their argument that Rudy really showed his priorities and how he wasn't really caring too much about his family, and he worried more about his adventure, and he didn't care about, the people that raised him. And I'll talk more about that in a moment, but Paul's overall demeanor, at least the way he was introduced, should have tipped Rudy off enough to know that something bad should have happened, and he should have asked what happened to his father, but also what happened to his mother and his siblings. There was a lot of things that he could have talked about, but he didn't. So there is a lot, like I said, to unbox from this episode, because Rudy did not handle the situation right, and Paul definitely did not handle the situation right as well. So, if we carry on with the conversation, they sit down at this, bar, this inn, and they just have a conversation. And Rudy, which is someone that's been having a lot of fun, and we've been with his journey for episodes now. We've known his journey and how much fun he's had. Even though there's been some struggle and some rough areas, he's had a very good journey. It hasn't been all nice, but it's been nice. Like, he's just enjoyed himself. And so he tells, his journey, his story to his father, which, in any given situation, a child at that age or whatever would picture, like, hey, they would be happy for me, that I got to go on an adventure, I was able to be safe, I was able to, keep Eris safe, try to help out this dude. You would think that, like, your parent would support you, your parent would be like, yo, you did a good job, like, I'm happy for you and all that, continue doing this, I'm happy to see my son, being a great adventurer. That's what Rudy obviously expected. He expected that type of reassurance, which no fault to him whatsoever. You would think that, someone would be happy, especially if they look withered and worn down like Paul, that they might be happy to see their son very happy. Their son to be in a good place and not distressed or depressed, whatever. That's what you would assume. But obviously, as he continues to tell his story, Paul opens up and is like, so, for the past year and a half, it seems like you've been having a really good time. A vacation, so to say. And you have not once tried to find the others. Which this is the bombshell that hits with the conversation and breaks everything down and showcases what Rudy's technically been doing wrong for a while. It's clear that Rudy has no idea what's going on. And he's asked, like, why didn't you search? And Rudy's like, honestly, I didn't think about it. And it's the best realistic answer that he could have gave. And I give points to that. The writing of Rudy just basically admitting, like, I didn't think about it. Like, I just didn't. It's so realistic. Like, let's be honest. There's many people out there that's currently watching this video have probably done something very similar. Something bad's happened, or you forgot about something and you're like, I didn't remember, I didn't think about it, and you just carried on. That's usually what kind of happens. So I like that interaction with Rudy and how he admits he didn't think to search for anyone else with the teleportation event or anything, because, he was doing his own thing. He was worried about protecting Eris, he was in a demon continent, stuff like that. He had a lot of other things going on his plate. So he didn't have the time, basically, to worry about, the teleportation for everyone, and he really didn't know the actual extent of it. Could he have learned more about it? Yes. But that's for a new conversation in a moment. The point is that Paul reveals what happened, and that, he starts to put his blame and expectations on Rudy, and basically saying, so you've been having a good time, you've been, with your girlfriend or whatever, just enjoying a vacation, and you haven't really been caring whatsoever about what's actually going on. And Paul is very aggressive. Just the way his demeanor is towards Rudy is very aggressive, and instantly anyone watching this episode, especially me as an anime only, is probably going to instantly be on Rudy's side and be like, yo, man, you're being, like, super aggressive. Like, you're definitely not the best person in the world. You're absolute scum. Like, you're a scumbag, what you did to your, your wife and all that, and then, the maid, and then, what you just showcased throughout the journey. This is just what you found out more about Paul. Paul is not a good person. So, when he starts to put this expectation and this just rudeness to Rudy, people are instantly going to side on Rudy. They're going to be like, yeah, Rudy, tell him like it is. And when Rudy opens up and just spits back at Paul and is like, oh, does, mom even know you're here? Do they know that you have this, woman right beside you and all that? And just everything about the conversation is probably what fans were, like, thinking, like, Rudy should do. It's like, Paul's being very rude, he's being really mean, and, someone that he hasn't seen in a year and a half, you think you'd be happy. Even if he is weathered, you'd think that the father still would be happy to see his son in such a good way. But so when Rudy, like, goes up against him and just starts, saying these different things, we get a little bit more context and information that the mother of Rudy, which is Paul's wife, is gone, missing, and so is the kids and all that. So when you look at that, it's like, oh crap, it kind of explains his demeanor, explains his upset. But then to dive into the nitty-gritty of why he was so angry with Rudy, it's because it's clear as day that Paul feels like Rudy is better than him. I got that entire vibe from it, that he had this inferiority complex, where he felt like Rudy was better in every way, smarter, intelligent, a better person, and so because of that, in his mind, and in his inferiority complex, he believed that his child, would be able to find everyone, figure out what's going on, and do what he probably could not do. So he put these unrealistic expectations on Rudy, and when he realized that Rudy actually didn't meet his expectations, he got very aggressive and very angry. That's why his demeanor was like it was at the beginning. Now, here's the thing. Like I said, Paul is definitely in the wrong for that, 100%. And instantly when people see the beginning part of the conversation, they're going to side with Rudy. I know I did when I was watching the episode. But then more things start to come out. After Rudy gets into his brief fight and all that with Paul, you see, him wonder more about his childhood friend, Sylphie, than his own mother. And Paul points out, so, like, you're worried more about your girlfriend than your own mom? And instantly that clicks. It's like, it's true. Rudy has cared more about like his childhood friend or anything besides his actual parents, his family. And it says enough. It shows where his priorities were, where they lie, and that Paul basically exposed Rudy in that very moment. Now, once again, Rudy is definitely in the wrong as well because of that. And Paul is in the wrong for trying to put these unrealistic expectations on his son. And once again, we gotta remember that Rudy is technically reincarnated. He isn't technically a child. But, at the same time, no one else is aware of this. Paul is not aware of this. So Paul is entirely wrong to do that to his own son. He should have been happy to see his son safe. But, the thing is that Rudy, the reason why he didn't actually think about anything else goes back to his previous life. It goes back to everything that was wrong with him before he had a second chance at life. And that is, he was someone that was a shut-in, didn't really have much going on in his life, and he was basically a loser. And when he finally died, he had a new shot, and he wanted to be able to do more with his life. And the whole point of the first section of Mushoku Tensei was him even being able to walk out of the house through the front gates and go into town. It was a huge moment for his character to even leave the house. I remember how emotional that episode was to show his growth as a person, finally taking the steps out of his comfort zone to try to better himself as a person. And so when you see how he is throughout these past few episodes, his adventure, it makes sense why he's acting like he is. Because all of his previous life, he never got to experience what his life had to offer. He felt regret and shame. So when you think about him going on an adventure being very happy, it makes sense why he would live it to the fullest. Like, why wouldn't he want to live his life to the fullest after everything that he's been through in his previous life? So of course he would take pride and joy in adventuring, going on a fantasy adventure with two other friends. It sounds like the life. So I can't fault him for that to begin with. He was trying to live his life to the fullest and do what basically a Isekai is in general of reincarnation. A second shot at life and live your life to the fullest. And that's what he indeed did. But to extend more to that discussion of Paul and Rudy both being at fault, we also got to remember that Rudy was in basically the center of the teleportation event. It's clear that he had probably no idea how big the teleportation actually would be. Example, when the teleportation happened, they were in the middle of the field. Eris and Rudy were side by side, and Ghislaine was also there. And in his mind, if Ghislaine was not there, hopefully I'm saying her name right, maybe she didn't teleport, it was just Eris and him. But if you would have been, let's say, in town, in the middle of a castle or whatever, and then got teleported, and then Eris was there but no one else was, he probably would be a little bit more aware of something's going on. He would probably think to check more into the teleportation event, but he did not, which you can't really fault him for that. On top of that, he was in the Demon Continent, and because of this unknown area, this new location, and him being children at that, they really didn't have any means to contact, the family, contact Paul or anyone, so you can't fault him either at that. There was so much more really going on at the given moment. And also the reason why he didn't check the Adventure Guild is because he was worried about just trying to get across the ocean to be able to get Rui across as well. So they weren't really focusing on checking the board for Paul's message. So there is a lot of ways to look at this, and when you think about it, both are in the wrong, as I've been saying, and both are in the right. I think Paul definitely pointed out Rudy's flaw, that he wasn't thinking about his family. And I feel like that is really wrong of Rudy not to do. But at the same time, I can't fault Rudy because he is trying to live his life to the fullest, which is what these series are about. And he just had so much other stuff going on, he just didn't think about it. So I am curious to see what's going to happen. And I really love the realistic depiction of anxiety as well. Once the argument was said and done and Rudy gets into, his room, you see him just trying to act like everything's okay. And when you see his face tense up and then he pukes, it's a really good representation of what anxiety can do to someone. Like, you just get absolutely sick to your stomach and you just throw up just because of the stress and you're scared, etc., anxious. It's a good episode. Like, hands down, this is a fantastic episode of the series. And, like, no bullcrap, like, no just hype beasting or whatever. This is hands down, like, probably the best episode of the series, and I feel like it's going to be extremely hard to beat such a well done episode, because it's not just the writing, it's also the voice acting. The voice acting for Paul and Rudy was just top notch on a whole other level that, like I said, reminded me so much of, you know, Subaru and Emilia scene where they had their little brief argument. So yeah, just good. Mushoku Tensei, definitely good. I see why people were hyping this up. I did not expect this type of outcome, but it is definitely going to lead to a lot of character development for Rudy, and I cannot wait to see the direction that is actually going to go. But, I guess I'm gonna, you know, leave it at that, though. I mean, there is some funny moments and good moments throughout this episode, but, I mean, just the overall tone of this episode is very dark and grim. I mean, you have the Goblin Slayer stuff, which was hilarious, reminding me of Goblin Slayer, to the opening shots being very nicely toned, to the choir music that shows the vibe of what type of town they're in, this religious town. It's a really good episode, just hands down. Not even the Paul and Rudy stuff, but just everything else was incredible, too. But okay, I'm gonna just leave it at that, though. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If I give you any form of entertainment while watching this video, you know, please leave me a like. It does help me out a lot. And with that, be safe. Chibi out.